I think there is no progress in guitar building at all. It simply goes back to where it came from.
About 10 years ago, I was really surprised to find that people had started building guitars like in the 50s or the 60s.
The trend of the 90s moved towards the classics again.
Die 80er Jahre waren ja geprägt von einem Fortschrittsgedanken, dass man die
In the 80s, everybody believed in unlimited progress. They kept trying to improve guitars with new elements like the Floyd Rose tremolo. They came up with active pickups, which were praised as the greatest improvement in the evolution of the electric guitar. Then suddenly there was a break. Up until the end of the 80s, guitars had been improved upon without compromise. Then the vintage boom started. This was pretty strange. But when you look at the circles of fashion through time, it's pretty easy to understand. Music itself doesn't regress. It just quotes the good old days.
The funny thing is that the real improvements are not odd modifications, but details that go back to the roots.
Gleichzeitig werden natürlich aber, und das bleibt ja verborgen, diese Instrumente.
These instruments look like vintage guitars, but they're built in a much faster, more cost-effective manner than they used to be. They're made with CNC routers. Their predecessors were carved with dupli carvers by workers who were dressed in Levi jeans and jackets. The clothes that a rock star wore on stage were the same as the work clothes worn by the man who built his guitars. Even if they look vintage, today's guitars are built by machines and computers. It's the same with automobiles. Cars like the PT Cruiser quote an era which is long gone.
The design concepts of Teufel guitars seem to make a slight bow to the legendary guitar guru Steve Klein. But they also incorporate features we already know from Ned Steinberger.
Steve Klein ist für mich einer.
Steve Klein is one of the greatest American luthiers. He was really consequent in the way he followed his own formal and constructional paths. Like Claudio Pagelli, he's one of the few people who can put into action a technical innovation or an idea that leads to a specific result. He does it in an aesthetic way, and in the end he always creates a new image of a guitar. This sets him and Pagelli apart from the rest. If you compare him to Ned Steinberger, you immediately see the difference. Ned Steinberger made a design that was revolutionary, but the sound was, let's put it like this, the sound was different. A lot of people didn't like the tone of his guitar, but he was very consistent about how he brought his design to life. Not just with the same sculptural aesthetics as Steve Klein's guitars. And that's what fascinates me about Steve. Unfortunately, his guitars are rare due to the amount of handcrafting and the resulting production costs. They're just too expensive for the average customer. Klein doesn't make industrial-made guitars.
Ken Parker zum Beispiel, der seine Gitarre.
Ken Parker had a different approach. He not only invented the Parker Fly, but also created a completely new look. Only a few luthiers are capable of doing this. It's a very consequent step to create this guitar. The first time I saw it at a trade show, I had associations with comics or cartoon characters. It's a very positive thing when the design study of a guitar stands for itself. You don't want to create formal aspects merely for formal reasons. The Parker Fly was probably created this way. Parker had an idea, he took a pen, and he just drew it in one go. I'm sure he knew the traditionalists wouldn't like it at all, but the concept of working with carbon fibers or putting a piezo pickup in a tremolo doesn't really appeal to vintage freaks anyway. So it didn't make a difference to him. This approach makes more sense to me than having a guitar with a vintage look and a modern sound. Ken Parker is really consistent, and he seems to be the last person who, with his Parker Fly guitar, gave mass production models a new kick. This guitar is visually unique.
Günstigere in Korea hergestellte Version übernommen wurde.
There's even a Korean copy, a two-dimensional look-alike of the original three-dimensional body shape.
Ihre Ausprägung eigentlich auch erst in der dritten Dimension richtig erklären.
But the Fly really needs the extra dimension. It lacks its visual qualities without the third dimension.
The Neu-Ulm-based visionary is already working on new projects. These guitars will definitely go a step further than what you or I can imagine in guitar design. We can't give you the whole news, but here is a peek into the future.
Man könnte die Gitarre als Swatch-Gitarre bezeichnen. Also
You could call it a Swatch guitar.
das ist eine Gitarre, die nach zeitgenössischen oder
It's a guitar that can be produced in a modern industrial production matrix or theme.
Thematik hergestellt wird.
And although it won't actually be a mass-production guitar, it will have the appearance or the aura that a mass-produced guitar has. This guitar is a true representation of the principle form follows production. It's exactly like the Fender Stratocaster that polarized the industry. It was also built in the form follows production way.
Eine Gitarre, die
It's a guitar that can change its appearance or pop attitude, much like a birdfish can change its tone. But this guitar can't change its tone. It's not about tone with this guitar. It's a guitar that you'll look good with, not one that you sound good with, although it's also going to sound very good. My prototypes sound very good, but that's simply a prerequisite. This isn't an area where this guitar has to set itself apart from other guitars. The sound just isn't that important.
Und damit will ich aber eben auch so diese
I also want to take away the fear factor of actually playing a guitar.
eine Gitarre auch zu spielen. Also es ist, glaube ich, schon
I think, well, in fact, I'm sure that if you pick up and play a birdfish, everyone else will think that just because you have this kind of guitar, you're a great guitar player. The birdfish just has an amazingly meaningful presence. This should definitely not be the case with my new guitar. People don't have such inhibitions about picking up an acoustic guitar and playing it, and they don't immediately blush when someone looks at them.
Wenn man eine E-Gitarre anfasst und die auch noch angeht.
If, however, someone picks up an electric guitar, and especially if it's plugged in, they have the feeling that they need to be able to play something.
Und das ist was eigentlich
And that's actually not always such a good thing, that people do not intuitively pick up and play a guitar. I think people pick up a Strat easier than they pick up a Les Paul. The Strat doesn't expect as much.
und das muss
My highest priority with this guitar is that it somehow says, come on, pick me up, play with me. It's not that difficult. You don't have anything to prove. One tone's enough, and you'll look fantastic.
Da habe ich mir ja schon nächtelang das Hirn zermartert.
I've had sleepless nights trying to figure out what a Teufel-made acoustic guitar would look like.
Ich habe einen konkreten Entwurf von einer Akustikgitarre.
I actually have a specific idea for an acoustic guitar, but I'm not yet ready for it. There are other things to be done. I do have an existing design study, though.
Die
It would be like one of those wooden toys you assemble from many parts. The last piece functions like a bolt which holds the guitar together. This could be the bridge or a part of the bridge. As soon as you put strings on the guitar, it's static and playable. But if you remove this last piece, the guitar would fall apart.
Die Welt braucht
The world doesn't necessarily need it, but I think it is a valuable addition. It broadens your horizons to show you can actually abstract a guitar.
Und sowas wird, denke ich, im Ausland schneller.
I think there will be a greater acceptance for those ideas internationally rather than here in Germany.
Für gut befunden als hier in Deutschland.
Das ist natürlich
It's a big advantage when people talk about your instruments. People recognize them easily because they simply don't look like any other guitars they've ever seen.